Good morning, my friends. This is Paul. And just a few minutes ago, I managed to beat a charming little game on the 3DS known as Miitopia. At first glance, Miitopia seems like a Final Fantasy ripoff with the support system from Fire Emblem Fates having a Tomodachi Life-esque twist to it. But even though the game has a simple premise and repetitive gameplay, this is an otherwise very charming experience that's up there with some of Nintendo's best, including Yoshi's Woolly World, in which good feel had a good amount of say in this game. So, what exactly is Miitopia? Well, the premise is that you have to save people's faces. That's about as deep as the story gets. It's definitely not a bad story by any means, but I'll get to that in a minute. For now, let's talk about basic gameplay. You have your main character, whom you can cast as whoever you want, even yourself if you want to. You get to choose that character's personality, war cry, and the personality affects the battles as well. And you can even name your character. There are also classes to choose from like Final Fantasy. For some odd reason, they still call them jobs. But they're very unique classes, including a mad scientist, a tank, and even a flower. It's a shame that some of them aren't available right away when you first boot up the game, which makes experimentation slightly not as much of an option as you'd like. Thankfully, the game does a good job of mixing up the action so that you get a good chance to mix and match different party members so that they can interact with each other. And that's what keeps the Final Fantasy style battle system and wandering around from getting too repetitious. Yes, you walk along a straight path instead of wandering the overworld like you do in Final Fantasy, but the battles are still random. However, this is one of the games where I'm willing to give it an exception because of the way that the unique classes and relationship aspects come into play. So first off, let's talk about the three things that make these battles unique. 1. Personality traits. Say you give a person a stubborn personality. That person can brace themselves for impact so that the attack from the enemy won't do as much damage. Let's say you gave someone an energetic personality. They could have a super powerful attack, but then hurt themselves in the process. It's little touches like that. Also, say you decide to cast yourself as a princess. You could put on a regal dance to distract the enemies, or use a paper fan to send waves of attack. The amount of creativity is simply phenomenal, and I would not want to talk about most of the surprises this game has in store. Speaking of which, I haven't even touched on the relationships yet. Depending on how close your characters are, which there's a variety of ways to do that, the fastest of which is putting your characters in the same room at an inn, which at some point in the game becomes unavoidable. So if you're one of those characters that is against the idea of guys and girls sharing a bedroom, they do have separate beds though. This game is E-rated. Just keep in mind that you'll eventually end up with 10 party members all together. So try to mix and match from there, because you get 3 at a time and you eventually end up with 10. So you can do the math roughly, give or take. And then depending on how strong the relationship is, that can cause various assists in battle. Like, for example, you could console someone that gets hurt, or you can shower them with praise to make their attack get better, or one person can attack from behind and the other from the front. They're very charming. Admittedly, the animations can get old, but thankfully you can hold down the B button pretty much any time in the game to make the game go faster if you do get tired of the same old stuff happening. However, one thing that I found that was really annoying about Miitopia was the fact that the characters got into quarrels quite a lot, and often for the dumbest reasons. Like, they might be tense after a long journey and be tired of each other watching each other's back. Or you'd have a special move that was super powerful, but it had a chance of hurting your friends, and rather than them being like, okay, it's a battle, and accidents happen, they can really get mad at you and sometimes get in your face about things. And most of the time it wasn't even my fault. Now, I could understand if maybe I was given the option to scare or ignore someone when they have the hiccups, and that person tends to have a grumpy personality. but if it's something as simple as a story-based opportunity, that just doesn't seem fair at all. It's probably why they got rid of the biorhythm in Radiant Dawn from the Future of the Fire Emblem games. I wonder. Now, your Miis, of course, can level up in typical Final Fantasy style with experience points, but you can also increase their statistics by giving them food. Like in Tomodachi Life, they have their likes and dislikes, but you won't know that until you try. And it's always fun to see their facial expressions depending on how much they like the food. Your customization options for what you give them to wear are rather limited, though. The game has a linear progression system that basically wants you to get the armor sets in the order that they choose. And the characters will often ask you straight out if they can have some gold so that they can buy some clothes for themselves. So, overall, would I say Miitopia is worth it? I would say, as I hope I said earlier in this video, that the demo should be able to convince you if you like it. However, one thing that the demo doesn't do enough to convey are the interesting plot twists in the story. Like I said, the basic premise is you're trying to rescue people's faces, but there are some surprising twists, including a lot of redemption, which I'm sure I'll mention in my Catholic review at some point. And even after you thought the game was over, it still has surprises. And then even then, there's a really sweet backstory that ends the game on a really high note. It might be the kind of game that you'd want to just Google the ending if you don't want to suffer through a slog of gameplay, but I found the game surprisingly addictive. I really enjoyed my time with the game, and although there were times where the story seemed unnecessarily dragged out, it also was made continuously worth coming back for the ever-changing music, which never stopped being charming and was surprisingly catchy, despite not being orchestrated, and it actually had a decently challenging final battle. So, all in all, I would say this is a good game. It might not be a masterpiece, it may not be Nintendo's greatest first-party effort ever, but it is one of their most creative outings yet, as well as one of their better marketing campaigns in recent memory. So, again, check out the demo, and even if you think you might like the game after getting the demo, I would still be willing to buy this full price. This is a well thought out, good, charming, and fun game that rewards experimentation, especially in relationships. And if you like Final Fantasy, then my complaints should be pretty much non-existent. Anyway, hope that wasn't rambling. It is pretty early in the morning. I can always do post-editing if this turns out to be too over-lengthy, but I hope you enjoyed my review. Stay tuned for my Catholic perspective once I've gotten a bit more sleep, and until then, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.